The first pistol came up before Camille Bennett could lower the kickstand. The second appeared in her mirror, held by an officer moving behind the Harley with both elbows locked. Engine off. Hands where I can see them. Camille killed the engine. The sudden silence made the traffic on Harbor Ridge Boulevard sound unnaturally close. Heat climbed through her dark jeans from the motorcycle, and the weight of her black helmet narrowed the officers' voices into harsh, metallic bursts. "Get off the bike," the younger officer ordered. "Don't move," the older one snapped at the same time. Camille held both gloved hands above the handlebars. "Your commands conflict. Tell me which one you want me to follow." The older officer advanced until she could read Pike on his nameplate. His gaze moved from her deep brown face behind the raised visor to the Burgundy Road glide beneath her, as though one of them had to be counterfeit. "Bike came back stolen," he said. "Step off, slowly." Camille knew that was impossible. She had renewed the registration herself 3 weeks earlier, after Jordan teased her for keeping every service receipt in a waterproof folder. Still, she swung her right leg over and planted both boots on the pavement. "Registration is in the left saddlebag," she said. "My identification is inside my jacket. I will not reach for either without permission." Pike's partner, Officer Caleb Van, glanced toward their cruiser. Its driver's door remained open, the mobile terminal glowing inside. For half a second, his expression changed. Not surprise. Uncertainty. Pike did not look back. "On your knees." Weekend drivers slowed beside the gas station. Someone lifted a phone through an open passenger window. Above the pumps, a security camera pointed directly toward the shoulder. Camille lowered herself carefully. "My name is Camille Bennett. I'm the elected sheriff of Ashford County. Verify that before this goes any further." Pike gave a short laugh. "And I'm the governor." He forced her forward. Her right forearm struck the sun-baked pavement, and heat bit through the leather sleeve before she could roll away. Pike pressed a knee between her shoulder blades while Van pulled her left arm behind her. The radio clipped inside Camille's jacket crackled. "Sheriff Bennett, Ashford Communications. Command is asking for your arrival status." Van stopped with one cuff open. Pike tore the radio free and stared at its county asset label. Camille felt his balance shift. He understood now, or understood enough to be afraid. "Ashford Communications," she called, keeping her voice level against the pavement. "Do not send units. Repeat, no armed response to this location." "Sheriff, confirm you're safe." Pike thumbed down the volume. "Could be a stolen radio." "Dorian," Van said quietly. The plate return on the screen was clear. Pike turned his head just enough to silence him. Van's hand moved toward the small notebook in his vest, then stopped. Camille could have countermanded herself. One sentence would bring county deputies across the city line within minutes. But Pike still had a weapon inches from her ribs. Van was frightened, and families were watching from the gas pumps. She would not turn a false stop into a cross-agency gunfight. Pike tightened the cuffs until metal cut through her gloves. "Officer Van, note that the suspect claimed law enforcement status after being detained." "She claimed it before," Van said. Pike rose and waved toward the cruiser. "Call Sloan Towing. Priority impound. We're booking her for vehicle theft, obstruction, and impersonating an officer." Van looked once at the glowing terminal, then wrote something in his notebook. Pike hauled Camille upright by the injured arm and marched the county sheriff toward the back of a city patrol car. The rear door opened onto a plastic seat already hot from the sun. Pike pushed Camille inside without protecting her head. Her helmet struck the doorframe, and the impact flashed white across her vision. "Medical attention," she said. "I have a thermal injury on my right forearm, and you just hit my head." Pike closed the door. Through the partition, Camille watched Van remain beside the Harley. He had opened his notebook again. Pike approached him, spoke too quietly for her to hear, then took the book from his hand and flipped through it. Van reached for it, but Pike held it against his own chest until the younger officer stepped back. Camille forced herself to breathe slowly. Panic made witnesses remember fragments. Training made them remember sequence. She fixed each detail in order. Contradictory commands, clear plate return, county transmission. Pike lowering the radio volume, Van's correction, Sloan towing. That habit had begun long before voters placed a sheriff's star beside her name. She had spent 14 years working road patrol, teaching recruits that memory was not evidence until it was preserved and tested. At home, the same habit irritated Jordan, who said her mother could turn a grocery receipt into a case file. The thought of her daughter sharpened the ache behind Camille's eyes. Jordan had stood in their garage that morning, tightening the strap on Camille's helmet while pretending not to worry about the dark clouds gathering west of Ashford County. At 19, she had inherited Camille's stubbornness and none of her patience for institutional excuses. "You could take the SUV, like a normal sheriff," Jordan had said. "A normal sheriff doesn't promise a motorcycle safety class and arrive in a government truck." Camille had spent the morning showing new riders how to break through a curve without staring at the obstacle they feared. Afterward, she had taken Harbor Ridge Boulevard toward the County Emergency Operations Center. Severe storms were expected by evening, and municipal chiefs were waiting for her to approve the mutual aid deployment plan. Now, her county radio rested in Pike's hand outside the cruiser. Van finally returned. Before getting behind the wheel, he opened Camille's door and reached across her carefully enough to avoid the burned arm. He fastened the seatbelt, then checked the cuffs. "They're too tight," she said. His thumb paused over the ratchet. "I can loosen the right one. Document the injury first. Then request a supervisor and EMS over recorded radio." Van looked toward Pike. "We can do that at the station. Heat injuries worsen under leather, you know that." He loosened the cuff by one notch, but did not call anyone. Pike climbed into the passenger seat, carrying Camille's radio and helmet. He had also removed the leather credential case from her jacket. He opened it, studied the gold sheriff's star and photo identification, then held it up for Van. "Professional counterfeit," Pike said. "Add it to the property." "The expiration and county seal are right," Van replied. "Drive." As they pulled away, a white tow truck rolled into the gas station lot with SLONE Recovery painted across its doors. It arrived too quickly for a normal rotation call. The driver went directly to Pike's cruiser before approaching the Harley. Camille twisted enough to see through the rear window. Her registration remained inside the left saddlebag. The security camera above the pumps still faced the shoulder, its small red status light glowing. "Preserve the station footage," she told Van. "Your department is now on notice." Pike turned around. "You don't give orders in my city." Camille met his stare through the partition. "That wasn't an order. It was a warning about evidence." Pike faced forward and used her radio to call Ashford Communications. "Your sheriff is in custody," he said, "and if any county unit interferes with this transport, I'll treat it as obstruction." The dispatcher did not answer immediately. When her voice returned, every trace of uncertainty was gone. "Message received. This channel is recorded." Rain began as Van turned toward Harbor Ridge Police Headquarters. The storm Camille had been preparing for was crossing the county without her. The city dispatcher called Van's unit twice. Pike answered on the dashboard microphone both times. "Possible vehicle theft and police impersonation," he said. "Suspect has county equipment and fraudulent credentials. Hold all verification requests until evidence is secured." Camille leaned toward the partition. "You have already heard Ashford Communications identify me." Pike muted the microphone. "Anything you say now goes in the arrest report. Then spell my name correctly." Van's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror before dropping back to the road. They entered through a gated vehicle bay instead of the public booking entrance. Pike led Camille into a narrow processing room where the air conditioning raised gooseflesh around the burn on her forearm. Her knee stiffened each time she tried to shift her weight. A booking officer asked whether she required medical treatment. "Yes," Camille said. Pike placed the credential case and county radio on the counter. She complained after resisting. "Photograph her first." The booking officer hesitated, then positioned Camille against a height chart. Pike stood close enough to enter every frame. He ordered her to turn left, then right, as if documenting a stranger whose identity remained unknowable. On a nearby terminal, Van began an incident supplement. Camille could see only pieces reflected in the dark window. Initial state, return clear. Local caution displayed. Driver compliant until removal. Pike noticed her watching and stepped between them. Caleb, conference room. Now. The door did not close completely behind them. The vehicle recovery review is Monday, Pike said, in a controlled whisper. Chief Kerr needs numbers before the city manager approves the new interdiction unit. We do not throw away a high-value recovery because the rider bought convincing credentials. The state database did not call it stolen. The local caution flagged a cloned plate connected to a theft series. That gives us the stop. It appeared after I read you the clear return. Silence followed. Then Pike's voice hardened. You want your probation evaluation signed, write what happened. She refused commands, reached toward her jacket, and produced suspected stolen police property. Those are facts. That isn't the order it happened. Pike stepped back into the processing room carrying Van's notebook. He placed it beside his computer but kept one palm over it. The desk phone rang. The booking officer answered, listened, then held the receiver toward Pike. Communications supervisor, Lila Gomez. Pike switched the call to speaker. Officer Pike, Lila said, the state vehicle return is valid and clear. Your unit added a local investigative caution afterward. I need the originating case number for the audit field. Pike looked at Camille. The originating case is being generated now, he said. Officer safety information developed during surveillance. Your unit was not logged on a surveillance assignment. Then log it as patrol intelligence and stop discussing an active investigation on speaker. Lila's tone remained neutral. I'll preserve the original event sequence with your correction. Pike disconnected the call. Camille understood what he had done. A local caution was not a stolen vehicle entry. It warned officers to investigate. It did not establish probable cause by itself. Pike was building the source record backward from the arrest. He opened a new report and typed while speaking each allegation aloud. Camille had accelerated away when signaled to stop. She had ignored repeated lawful commands. She had reached toward a concealed object. She had claimed to be sheriff only after officers discovered police equipment. The Harley displayed a plate associated with organized vehicle theft. Every sentence transformed a documented act of compliance into evidence of guilt. I want my objection recorded, Camille said. The report omits the clear return, the county transmission, my credential, my request for EMS, and Officer Van's correction. Pike continued typing. Suspect attempted to direct and intimidate personnel by invoking political authority. The booking officer moved the credential case into a clear property bag. Pike stopped her before she sealed it. He changed the label from verified identification to suspected counterfeit government credential. Where is the motorcycle registration? Camille asked. Sloan Recovery will inventory the bike, then place them on preservation notice 2. Pike smiled without warmth. You can make requests when we confirm who you are. He selected 3 proposed charges: possession of a stolen vehicle, obstruction, and impersonating a peace officer. Then he attached the local caution he had called patrol intelligence. Van stood in the doorway, his face pale. His notebook remained beneath Pike's hand. Pike pressed submit. The screen assigned a case number, and the lie became the official reason Camille Bennett was locked in a holding cell. The holding cell had no clock, only a fluorescent panel that hummed above a steel bench. Camille sat with her right arm lifted away from her body. The leather sleeve had fused against the worst part of the burn, and each small movement pulled at the skin beneath it. Rain hammered the narrow window in the door. When the booking officer finally returned with 2 paramedics, Pike followed them inside. She fell while resisting, he said. The older paramedic examined the sleeve without touching it. This is a contact burn. We need to cut the jacket and clean it at the hospital. She also reports a head strike. She can be cleared here. Not by me. Pike's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. One paramedic checked Camille's pupils, while the other placed gauze loosely around her forearm. The simple act of being addressed as a patient, instead of a suspect, nearly broke the control she had held since the roadside. Can you contact family? The paramedic asked. They get 1 call after Prince, Pike said. Camille looked at the booking officer. Your policy allows a medical detainee to notify an emergency contact before transport. The officer glanced toward a laminated procedure card beside the telephone. Pike noticed too late. 5 minutes later, Camille heard Jordan answer on the second ring. "Mom?" Her voice was already shaking. "There's a video. They have you on the ground. People are saying you stole the bike." Camille closed her eyes. She had wanted to reach her daughter before a stranger's camera did. "I'm alive. My arm is burned, and they're taking me to Harbor Ridge Medical." "Why didn't you call your deputies?" There were 2 nervous officers with guns out and civilians standing behind them. "So you protected everyone except yourself." The words landed harder because they were not entirely wrong. Camille had built her administration around restraint. The sheriff's office she inherited had treated authority like a personal possession, and she had promised Ashford County that her badge would never place her above verification. But somewhere along the way, restraint had become her answer to every injury, including the ones her daughter had to watch. "Jordan, listen carefully. Go to the gas station on Harbor Ridge Boulevard. Ask the manager to preserve every exterior camera from today. Do not confront the officers or the tow company. Get the manager's name, write down the request, and leave." Jordan went silent. "You're giving me an assignment? I'm asking for your help." That distinction cost Camille more than giving an order would have. "I'll do it," Jordan said. "But we are not pretending this didn't hurt me too." The line disconnected before Camille could answer. At the hospital, Van cuffed her left wrist to the rail, while a nurse cut away the right sleeve of her riding jacket. A raw red patch extended from her wrist, nearly to her elbow. The physician ordered wound treatment, knee imaging, and observation for a possible concussion. Pike stood outside the curtain dictating his report. He emphasized the local vehicle caution and omitted Lila's statement about when it appeared. By then, the city had released a short public notice describing Camille only as a woman claiming to hold county office during a suspected vehicle theft arrest. A television above the nurse's station showed the roadside video without sound. The clip began after Camille was already kneeling and ended before the county radio identified her. Underneath it, a banner questioned whether an armed impersonator had been stopped near the storm response route. Van watched from the doorway. They cut the beginning. "A short clip can be accurate and still create a lie," Camille said. He looked down at the notebook Pike had returned to him. One page had been bent at the corner, but it remained intact. "Did you write down the original plate return?" she asked. Van did not answer. "You are not required to speak to me," Camille said. "But you are required to preserve what you recorded." Pike entered, carrying a tablet. The duty prosecutor accepted the charges for review. "Until identity verification is completed through our command staff, she remains in city custody." Camille saw Van close his notebook. Pike placed the tablet before her. It contained a property acknowledgement listing the Harley, helmet, radio, credential case, and phone. The registration was absent. "Sign. Add the registration folder from the left saddlebag. The tow inventory isn't finished. Then I won't certify an incomplete list." Pike withdrew the tablet. Refusal noted. Camille looked past him to Van. "Record that I requested preservation of the gas station video, the complete CAD event, the radio channel, your notebook, and Sloan's intake record." Pike started to speak, but Van opened the notebook. For the first time since drawing his gun, he wrote without looking to Pike for permission. Van had written half a sentence when footsteps approached from the nurse's station. Pike reached for the notebook, but Van closed it and slid it into the inner pocket of his vest. Police Chief Mason Kerr entered through the curtain wearing the white command shirt Camille had seen across the emergency operations table that morning. Rain darkened both shoulders. He looked first at her bandaged arm, then at the cuff securing her to the bed. "Sheriff Bennett." Pike straightened. "Chief, the subject's identity has not been authenticated. We recovered suspected counterfeit credentials and a county radio." Kerr stared at him. "I have sat beside Camille Bennett at 6 command meetings this month." He turned to Van. "Remove the cuff." Van unlocked it immediately. Blood returned painfully to Camille's hand. She did not thank Kerr for recognizing her. Recognition was the minimum that should have happened beside the Harley. "Who authorized the public statement?" she asked. The watch commander used Pike's preliminary report. Kerr kept his voice low. I ordered a correction before leaving the operations center. A correction to what? Your identity. The underlying stop is under administrative review. That answer told Camille where the city intended to draw its first defensive line. They would concede she was sheriff while preserving the claim that the officers had acted reasonably before learning it. Pike stepped closer. The local caution identified a possible cloned plate associated with organized theft. Her position does not invalidate the stop. The state return was clear, Van said. Kerr looked between them. What local caution? The hospital phone rang before Pike could answer. A nurse handed the receiver to Kerr and said communications had requested a secure callback. He listened without speaking for nearly a minute. When he ended the call, his face had changed. Lila Gomez preserved the complete CAD event, he said. The state query returned clear. A local patrol intelligence caution was added from your mobile session afterward, Pike. Pike did not retreat, because I observed indicators of a cloned plate after the query. Local policy authorizes an officer safety entry while an investigation develops. It was a better defense than denying the log. The audit could establish which authenticated session created an entry, but not whose fingers touched the keyboard. Pike was already shifting from claiming the system flagged Camille to claiming he had exercised professional judgment. What indicators? Camille asked. You accelerated when we activated our lights. You had police equipment. You reached into your jacket. You activated your lights after following me into the gas station lane. I stopped before the first command. The camera will establish that. For the first time, Pike's expression slipped. Kerr did too. Both officers are relieved from field duty pending review, he said. Turn over every report, recording, note, and device connected to this stop. Neither of you contacts Sloan Recovery. Chief. The interdiction review is Monday, Pike said. This would be our 10th high-value recovery. You pull us now, the city manager kills the unit. Then the unit waits. There it was. The benefit Pike had been protecting. A promotion path, specialized overtime, and a public statistic valuable enough to build backward from an innocent rider. Pike's eyes moved to Camille. You think this ends because he knows your face? No, she said. I think it begins because you knew who I was and continued. Kerr ordered him out. Jordan arrived soon afterward, carrying Camille's cut riding jacket in a clear hospital bag and a handwritten receipt from the gas station manager. The exterior recordings had been locked against automatic deletion. Jordan placed the receipt on Camille's blanket, but did not embrace her. The city's correction says you failed to identify yourself promptly, she said. I identified myself before they touched me. Then say that publicly. Camille glanced at Kerr. Not until the original files are secured and authenticated. Jordan laughed once, without humor. They already published their version. You're still waiting for permission to defend yourself. I'm protecting the case. And who is protecting you? The physician returned with the imaging results. No fracture, but Camille had a deep knee contusion, a second-degree forearm burn, and concussion symptoms that prohibited driving for several days. Her first ride after the safety class would end with Jordan taking the helmet home and Sloan Recovery holding the motorcycle. Kerr signed the city release order. The impersonation and stolen vehicle allegations would be withdrawn from the custody record, but Pike's obstruction accusation remained referred to the duty prosecutor. Camille read every line before accepting the copy. I'm recusing the sheriff's office from investigating this, she told Kerr. Preserve everything and request an outside investigator. We can resolve this internally. You can review your officers internally. You cannot investigate a case in which your department arrested the county sheriff and then rewrote the reason. Jordan finally reached for Camille's uninjured hand. Kerr looked at their joined fingers, then at the preservation receipt on the blanket. I'll make the request, he said. Outside the curtain, Pike's footsteps stopped. He had heard every word. Velcro rasped across Camille's kitchen table as Jordan replaced the dressing on her forearm. The sound made Camille think of the cuffs closing, and her muscles tightened before she could stop them. Too tight? Jordan asked. No. Keep going. Jordan loosened it anyway. Camille had been discharged into her care the previous night, with instructions not to drive, ride, or make critical decisions while the concussion symptoms remained. The irony was not lost on either of them. Camille's entire job consisted of critical decisions, and the county was still cleaning storm debris while its sheriff sat beneath a kitchen light wearing one sleeve. Her deputy chief had handled the emergency plan exactly as designed. No lives had depended on Camille's personal arrival. Even so, she kept replaying her command over the radio. No armed response. It had prevented a dangerous confrontation. It had also left Pike in control long enough to injure her, seize the motorcycle, and write the first public version. Jordan secured the bandage. You made the safest decision you could while 2 guns were pointed at you. I made the safest decision for everyone standing behind me. That is not the same answer. Before Camille could respond, the doorbell rang. Naomi Cole, from the State Public Integrity Bureau, waited outside with Lila Gomez. Naomi was compact, gray-haired, and direct. Lila looked younger than her steady telephone voice had suggested. She carried no files, only a city identification card and the strain of someone who had been warned not to be there. Chief Kerr requested an independent review, Naomi said after they sat down. The prosecutor has paused the obstruction referral, but it has not been formally declined. I need your account as a complainant, not as a sheriff directing an investigation. Camille nodded. That distinction matters. Lila placed her hands flat on the table. City Council instructed employees not to discuss the event outside the administrative chain. Investigator Cole requested me as the system custodian, so I'm here under her authority. That was how trust began for Camille, not with loyalty, but with someone naming the boundary and staying inside it. Naomi opened an encrypted evidence viewer. The first file contained the county radio recording. Pike's voice was unmistakable as he called Camille's radio stolen, threatened responding deputies with obstruction, and continued after Ashford Communications repeatedly used her title. The second file was Lila's certified export of the municipal CAD event. She explained only what the system could establish. Pike's individual multi-factor session had requested the plate. The state return came back clear. 83 seconds later, the same authenticated session created a local patrol intelligence caution describing a possible cloned plate and armed rider. Can the audit prove Pike typed it? Camille asked. It proves his session created it from his assigned vehicle, Lila said. The terminal camera does not record the cabin. Another person could have used the unlocked session, which is already his defense, Naomi said. Pike's union attorney had submitted notice that Van might have entered the caution while Pike watched the motorcycle. It was an intelligent shift. If the city could not prove who touched the keyboard, Pike could characterize everything afterward as reliance on information supplied by his partner. Lila enlarged the event history. Standard reports display the newest caution as though it existed when the plate was first queried. Dispatchers have to open the audit pane to see creation order. Supervisory approval is not required for temporary patrol intelligence. So the system concealed its own sequence from anyone who did not know where to look, Jordan said. It did not conceal it, Lila replied carefully. It failed to place the sequence where reviewers would naturally see it. Pike knew that. He teaches the mobile data refresher. The gas station recording played next. It showed Camille entering the lane at normal speed, stopping before either officer left the cruiser, and raising her empty hands. The camera had no usable audio, but it captured Pike returning to the passenger door, while Van remained behind the Harley. It also showed Pike kick the registration folder beneath the motorcycle after Camille identified its location. Jordan turned away from the screen. Camille reached for her, then stopped because the movement pulled at the burn. Jordan noticed and moved her chair closer. Naomi paused the video. The image supports compliance and opportunity, but it still does not show the terminal. I need Van's notebook, the tow intake, and a lawful interview with both officers. Sloan Recovery has not produced the inventory, Lila said. They claim the storm disrupted their upload. Camille heard the excuse for what it was, time being purchased. Lila's phone vibrated. She read the message. and color left her face. City Council had placed her on administrative leave for possible unauthorized access to confidential CAD audit data. At the same moment, Pike's union attorney sent Naomi a demand to exclude every file Lila had preserved. Pike had learned exactly where the first real threat to his story came from. 11 days after the stop, Camille entered a State Bureau conference room with her forearm wrapped and knee braced. Jordan still drove her to every appointment. The Harley remained behind Sloan Recovery's chain-link fence. Lila sat across from Naomi, with a city attorney beside her. She remained on paid leave. Naomi began with what the city could no longer dispute: a second certified CAD export, produced under formal demand, matched Lila's export byte for byte. The sequence was unaltered, and Lila had accessed it within her supervisory permissions while documenting a dispatch discrepancy. "They can argue about why she preserved it," Naomi said. "They cannot argue that she invented it." The city attorney stopped taking notes. Camille studied a spreadsheet derived from the same CAD source and the Sloan intake records that had finally arrived. She had asked Naomi to examine a narrow question: how often had a clear state return been followed by a local caution and a high-value tow credited to Pike? The answer was 9 times in 14 months. 7 involved motorcycles. Every caution originated from Pike's session. Every vehicle went to Sloan Recovery, even when another company was next in rotation. 6 owners paid substantial fees. 2 abandoned their bikes. Pike had claimed specialized overtime on each recovery. His application to lead the proposed interdiction unit cited all 9 as proof of exceptional vehicle theft work. "A pattern is not proof that every stop was fabricated," the city attorney said. "Correct," Camille replied. "It tells us where lawful review is necessary. It does not authorize us to skip that review." Naomi opened the intake file for Camille's Harley. The first photographs showed the waterproof registration folder inside the left saddlebag. A later inventory sheet marked the compartment empty. Sloan's original image timestamps had survived because the photographs were automatically attached to the city invoice before the inventory was edited. Victor Sloan claimed an employee had moved the folder and forgotten to document it. He denied coordinating with Pike and refused a voluntary interview. His refusal proved nothing by itself, but the conflicting records defeated Pike's claim that no ownership document had been found. The final item on the table was Van's notebook, sealed after his attorney delivered it to Naomi. The bent page contained the plate number, the word "clear" in capital letters, and a line written several minutes later: "D.P. says local caution now possible clone." Beneath it, Van had recorded Camille's preservation requests at the hospital. In a compelled administrative statement, Van admitted aiming his weapon, delaying medical care, and letting Pike alter the chronology. He placed Pike alone beside the terminal when the caution appeared. Naomi kept that interview separate from the criminal inquiry, while the independently created notebook and system records remained available to both paths. "He is cooperating," the city attorney said. "He is finally telling the truth," Camille answered. "That does not erase where he pointed his gun." Camille understood that refusing protection could become another form of control. She accepted Naomi's authority, Lila's expertise, and Van's limited contribution without surrendering her judgment. The evidence established a wider practice and a false report. One question remained vulnerable. The CAD log showed Pike's account. The gas station video placed him at the passenger side of the cruiser during the relevant interval. Van's notebook placed him beside the terminal. But none of those sources alone showed his hands creating the caution. Pike's defense had narrowed to that gap. Chief Kerr issued a notice of termination after reviewing Naomi's administrative findings. He cited the fabricated chronology, medical neglect, false statements, and misuse of the patrol intelligence system. Van received a proposed suspension and retraining order, with final discipline reserved until the review ended. The city froze the interdiction unit proposal and suspended Sloan's rotation contract. Pike appealed before the ink on the notice had dried. His union attorney accused Kerr of sacrificing an officer to protect relations with an elected sheriff. The appeal demanded a public civil service hearing and argued that Van had created the caution, Lila had conducted an unlawful data search, and Camille had used county power to manufacture a retaliation case. That evening, a selectively edited portion of the county radio call appeared online. It included Camille ordering deputies not to respond, but remove the dispatcher identifying her, and Pike calling the radio stolen. A caption claimed the sheriff had prevented witnesses from reaching the scene because she knew the Harley was under investigation. Jordan found Camille standing in the garage, staring at the empty space where the motorcycle belonged. "They turned your restraint into guilt," she said. Camille listened to the clipped recording once. Then she closed the browser. "No," she said. "They turned it into a question. At the hearing, we answer it with the whole sequence." Her phone rang before she could leave the garage. Lila's name appeared on the screen, followed by a message from City Council warning Camille that any contact with the suspended dispatcher could be portrayed as witness coordination. The pressure was no longer aimed only at the sheriff. It had moved to everyone willing to authenticate the record. The proposed settlement arrived 4 days before the civil service hearing. Pike would accept a 10-day suspension and resign 6 months later. The city would remove the fabrication finding, restore Lila, seal the records, and call the arrest a confusing interagency encounter. No admission, no public evidence, no review of the 9 earlier recoveries. Chief Kerr read the terms in Camille's office while the municipal insurer's attorney waited on speakerphone. "This ends the employment case," Kerr said. "It gets Lila back to work and keeps Pike off the street after 6 months. It also preserves his certification," Camille replied. He could join another department the following week. The attorney's voice emerged from the phone. "Sheriff Bennett, you are a witness, not a party to the employment appeal. Then stop asking for my agreement." Kerr walked to the window. "The board could reduce the discipline anyway. Pike's lawyer will argue Van used the terminal. He'll argue Lila exceeded her authority. He'll put you and Jordan under oath and make this look like political retaliation." Camille's bandage had been replaced by a thin protective sleeve, but reaching across the desk still pulled at healing skin. She pushed the settlement back with her left hand. "You decide whether your city accepts it. I will not sign a statement calling deliberate conduct confusing." The refusal had consequences before sunset. Pike's union published Camille's election donations, travel records, and safety class photographs. None showed misconduct, but the volume created suspicion. Anonymous accounts accused Jordan of arranging an edited recording. Her college advised her to stay away after threats appeared beneath her photograph. Camille found her packing a bag at home. "I can arrange a county escort," Camille said. Jordan pulled a sweatshirt over her head. "That will prove their point for them. Then let me drive you somewhere safe. The doctor still hasn't cleared you." Camille had an answer for every operational problem and none for the look on her daughter's face. "I should have protected your name from this," she said. Jordan stopped packing. "You should stop deciding alone what protection looks like." It was the same mistake Camille had made on the pavement. She had chosen for everyone because she trusted her own restraint more than she trusted other people to share the risk. "What do you want?" Camille asked. "I want to testify. I asked the manager to preserve the recording. I watched him lock the file and write the receipt. If they call that manipulation, I want to answer it myself." Camille wanted to refuse. Instead, she sat beside the open bag and listened while Jordan set her own boundaries. Lila made the same choice. City Council offered to restore her immediately if she signed a memo stating that opening the CAD audit pane had fallen outside ordinary dispatch practice. She declined. Through Naomi, she requested permission to authenticate the export at the public hearing. "Tell Camille not to trade a true record for my paycheck," her message said. The city rejected Pike's settlement the next morning. Naomi prepared the witnesses by separating each source's function. The radio established what Pike heard. The CAD audit established sequence and session. The gas recording showed compliance and officer positions. Sloan's file proved the registration existed before the inventory changed. Van's notebook preserved his contemporaneous observations. "The board is not deciding criminal guilt," Naomi reminded them. "It is deciding whether the city had sufficient cause to terminate Pike. A separate prosecutor will decide what, if anything, can be charged. 5 weeks after the stop, the Harbor Ridge hearing room was full. Pike sat beside his union attorney. Camille wore her sheriff's uniform for the first time since the injury, its right sleeve altered around the burn. Jordan occupied the seat beside her by choice. Pike's attorney began with the edited radio call. He played Camille's order forbidding county units to respond, then suggested she had deliberately isolated the encounter because she intended to convert a routine stop into a political case. He called Van first. Van admitted Pike's session remained open inside the shared cruiser, that he sometimes used the passenger terminal, and that he kept his notebook overnight before sealing it. "So you had access to the session," the attorney said. "You had access to the notebook, and you faced dismissal unless someone else carried the blame." "Yes," Van said. "I had access." The answer rippled through the room. The attorney displayed the notebook page. "Nothing here records an exact creation time. Nothing identifies which officer touched the keyboard. Isn't it true that you created the caution and blamed Officer Pike only after learning the rider was the county sheriff?" Van looked toward Camille, then at Pike. Before he could answer, Pike leaned toward his attorney and whispered something. The attorney smiled and withdrew the question. Camille understood the maneuver. They did not need Van to prove their version. They needed only enough uncertainty to make Pike's version possible. The board chair called a recess, with the city's evidence still unheard. As Pike passed Camille, he kept his voice too low for the microphones. "Reasonable doubt," he said. "Wrong forum," Camille answered. But when the board returned, one member asked Naomi whether any single record could conclusively identify the person at the keyboard. Naomi answered honestly, "No single record can." The board member's question hung over the hearing room. No single record could identify the person at the keyboard. Pike's attorney leaned back, as if the case had already ended. The city attorney looked down at his exhibit list. Naomi did not move. Camille wrote one sentence on the legal pad before her and slid it forward. "Stop trying to make one record do the work of 5. The city called Lila Gomez. Lila authenticated the original CAD event and the independent export produced by municipal technology staff. She explained that the audit recorded not only Pike's authenticated session but the hardware identifier of the passenger side terminal inside his assigned cruiser. The caution could not have been created through a handheld radio or Van's personal device." Pike's attorney stood. "But Officer Van could use that terminal." "Yes," Lila said, "if he was physically inside the cruiser during the 83-second interval." The gas station recording supplied the next piece. Its internal clock had been checked against the payment system before the manager exported it, and Jordan's signed preservation receipt established when the untouched file left automatic rotation. On the screen, Van stood several yards behind the Harley, with both hands visible. Pike stepped out of the passenger side, looked toward Camille, then leaned back through the open door. The CAD event marker appeared beside the video at the instant the caution was saved. Pike emerged, closed the door, and drew his weapon. The attorney objected that the camera could not show Pike's hands touching the keys. "That is true," Naomi said from the witness chair. "It shows access and opportunity. The audit establishes the terminal and session. The remaining sources establish knowledge and conduct." Van returned to the stand. This time he answered the question Pike's attorney had withdrawn. "I did not create the caution," he said. "I read the clear return aloud. Pike told me to cover the rear of the motorcycle. When he came back from the terminal, he said there was a local caution now." The union attorney attacked his notebook. He suggested Van had written the words later to save his job. Van acknowledged his own failures without bargaining around them. "I pointed my weapon at Sheriff Bennett. I helped put her on the pavement. I delayed the medical call, and I should be disciplined. But I did not create that entry." The board examined the bent page. Its next lines documented Camille's county identification and preservation requests in the same ink and continuous sequence as Van's other patrol notes. Pike had taken the notebook at the station, giving him an opportunity to challenge the entry before the investigation. He had never claimed it was newly added until after the termination notice. Camille took the stand last. Pike's attorney approached with the confidence of someone expecting anger. You ordered armed county personnel not to respond, correct? Correct. Because you wanted no independent officers at the scene. Because 2 officers already had guns pointed toward civilians at a gas station. Sending more armed personnel across a jurisdictional line would have increased the danger. He played the edited radio segment. That is your voice? It is part of my transmission. Play the complete channel. The full recording began with Ashford Communications asking Sheriff Bennett for her arrival status. It captured Camille identifying herself, Pike calling the radio stolen, Van stating that the plate return had been clear, and Pike threatening county units with obstruction. No one applauded when it ended. The board members simply began writing. The attorney changed direction. Even if Officer Pike misunderstood the caution, an officer may use reasonable force during a suspected felony stop. That depends on facts known at the time, Camille said. The state return was clear. I stopped before the first command. My hands remained visible. The local caution did not exist until his session created it. You cannot prove he created it. Then accept your alternative. Suppose Officer Van created it without his knowledge. Pike still heard Van say the return was clear. He still heard County Dispatch identify me. He still saw my credential. Lila then told him on speakerphone that the caution was added after the clear return. Camille turned toward the board. Pike's report says the caution existed before he signaled me to stop. He wrote that report after hearing every contradiction I just listed. Either he created the caution, or he knowingly used an entry he could not authenticate and then falsified when it appeared. His own defense does not make his report true. The city displayed the Sloan intake photographs. Camille's registration folder was visible inside the saddlebag before the inventory marked it missing. Pike's report claimed officers had found no ownership document. His attorney blamed Sloan employees, but the photographs had attached automatically to the city invoice before any dispute arose. Pike finally testified. He called each decision a judgment made under pressure. He blamed Van for the terminal, Dispatch for unclear phrasing, Sloan for the missing registration, and Camille for making the encounter political. He admitted no wrongdoing. The board recessed for 2 hours. When its members returned, the chair separated the issues carefully. They made no criminal finding and expressed no view on Pike's future certification. Their authority extended only to city employment. The decision was unanimous. Harbor Ridge had established sufficient cause for termination through dishonesty, misuse of police information, unreasonable escalation, denial of medical care, and falsification of the incident chronology. Pike remained seated while his attorney gathered the exhibits. The board clerk transmitted the public record to the state certification authority and the independent prosecutor. The prosecutor formally declined the obstruction charge against Camille 3 days after the hearing. The written notice did more than close the referral. It stated that the evidence showed she had complied with commands, identified herself before being restrained, and attempted to prevent an armed confrontation between agencies. Harbor Ridge replaced its earlier public notice with that finding. The correction remained less widely shared than the accusation, but it placed the truth in the same official archive where Pike had tried to preserve the lie. The remaining consequences moved at the slower speed of law. 4 months later, the State Certification Board held a separate hearing. Pike received counsel, challenged the CAD audit again, and argued that termination was already sufficient punishment. The board found that his false report and deliberate misuse of police information made him unfit to exercise law enforcement authority. His certification was revoked. The independent prosecutor filed charges only after completing a criminal review that excluded Van's compelled employment statement. The case relied instead on the authenticated CAD exports, radio recording, gas station video, tow invoices, original notebook, and testimony obtained through the criminal process. Nearly a year after the stop, Pike pleaded guilty to falsifying a public record and official misconduct. He received a custodial sentence, followed by supervised probation, and was prohibited from seeking another policing position. Victor Sloan was charged separately with altering commercial records connected to multiple vehicle inventories. His case remained pending when the city permanently canceled his towing contract. A court-appointed audit identified 6 owners who had paid improper storage charges and 2 who had lost motorcycles after being unable to pay. The city and Sloan's insurer funded restitution, while ownership disputes over the 2 sold bikes continued in civil court. Van's cooperation did not erase his conduct. Harbor Ridge imposed a 6-week unpaid suspension, removed him from probationary patrol, and required remedial firearms and medical response training before he could return under close supervision. At his disciplinary meeting, he accepted each finding without blaming Pike. Camille did not ask for leniency or additional punishment. Accountability, she had learned, became distorted whenever one powerful person tried to control every outcome. Lila returned to communications with back pay and a cleared personnel record. She declined the city's private apology and requested a written correction instead. Kerr signed it. He also accepted a formal reprimand for allowing Pike's preliminary report to become a public statement before basic verification. He remained chief long enough to implement the reforms he had initially resisted. Local patrol intelligence cautions now displayed their creation time beside the underlying state return. They expired unless a supervisor reviewed the source. Every high-value tow followed an automated rotation, and changes to an inventory generated an immutable notice to the records unit. Ashford County and Harbor Ridge created a secure credential verification channel that did not depend on personal recognition. Camille insisted the policy apply to every citizen claiming official status, not merely sheriffs. The new rule required officers to reduce immediate danger first, verify through a recorded channel, and document the factual basis for any continued detention. 18 months after the arrest, Camille's civil rights claim ended in a settlement covering medical care, lost use of the motorcycle, and damage caused by the city's false public statement. The agreement funded an independent review of the 9 earlier stops and required Harbor Ridge to publish the results. It did not end Sloan's pending case or the owner's claims, and it did not pretend one payment could restore what the roadside video had taken from Camille and Jordan. The complete evidence archive remained with Naomi's bureau until the criminal and certification matters closed. Certified copies then went to the city clerk, the county records office, and attorneys representing the affected motorcycle owners. No one person controlled the only surviving version. Camille's concussion symptoms faded within weeks. The knee improved through months of physical therapy. The burn left a dark, uneven scar along her right forearm that tightened in cold weather and made the cuff of her old riding jacket uncomfortable. She kept the jacket after the hospital returned it, not as a trophy but because Jordan asked her not to throw away every object connected to pain. Their repair took longer than the skin. Camille began telling Jordan when she was frightened, instead of translating fear into instructions. Jordan stopped treating every offer of protection as an attempt at control. They argued often, but the arguments ended with decisions both of them had helped make. When Camille returned to full duty, she changed one practice in her own office that no settlement required. Critical commands made during officer-involved emergencies had to be reviewed afterward by a team, including the person most affected. Her decision to prevent county deputies from responding remained tactically sound, but the review acknowledged its personal cost. Camille allowed that conclusion to stand beside her own. The Harley came home with scratches along one saddlebag and a damaged mirror. The city paid for the repairs, but Camille left the shallow scrape beneath the seat untouched. For several months, she walked past the motorcycle without starting it. On a cool Saturday morning, Jordan found her in the garage holding the key. "You don't have to ride today," Jordan said. "I know. And you don't have to ride alone." Camille looked toward the second helmet resting on the workbench. Asking someone to come with her still felt more difficult than giving an order over a radio. "Help me check the mirror," she said. Jordan picked up the wrench. Together they tightened the last bolt, rolled the burgundy Harley into the sunlight, and listened as its engine settled into a steady rhythm beneath both their hands.